Okay. This session is being recorded. By participating in this session, you are consenting to the recording, retention, and use of this session. That does include any chat that you enter. No other recording of this session is allowed. That includes any type of AI note-taking. So if you happen to have that on your system, please turn that off. Okay, so we are almost 3/4 of the way through the 24-25 program year, which means we should, as a state, be well on our way to achieving our 37% measurable skill gain target. Most of our measurable skill gains come from educational functioning level gains through post-testing. Therefore, today's webinar is focusing on the data that are available to you, to programs, and especially program administrators and coordinators related to post-testing and educational functioning level gains. So in today's webinar, I'm going to start with some year-to-date data related to post-testing and EFL gains, and then show you some of the reports that the advisors and I use as part of our desk monitoring. Then Allison Ludlow from the Lehigh Carbon Community College will give you an example of how she uses the Access template for local purposes. Michael and Steve will follow that with a demonstration of the Access template, and we'll end with a discussion of next steps and resources. So this is the table that I showed you in last month's webinar. So it was from the was kind of some of the data as of kind of mid-February. So if you'll remember, I did some calculations and I said that to meet our 37% measurable skill gains with EFL gains alone, which I know we don't, but just assuming that we could do it with EFL gains alone, if our table 4B rate, so that's the last column, and as a reminder, table 4B is the percentage of individuals who were post-tested who showed an EFL gain based on that post-test. So if our table 4B rate stays around 57%, then we must post-test no fewer than 65% of our students. Okay, so just kind of as a reminder, that's what I was talking about last month. So that was last month then. This is where we are as a state as of March 17th. So I pulled the data on Monday. Now, I do want to point out that on this table, I have family literacy as the bottom line. The way I pulled the data from the Access template to calculate these numbers, family literacy was separate from the spreadsheet that I had for the other 3 grants. So the family literacy is a unique line there. The first 3 rows, of course, are the Adult Basic Education Direct Service, 064 grants, the Section 243 IELCE 061 grants, and the Tutoring for Adult grants, which are 259. And then that 4th row is a sum of the first 3 rows. Something to keep in mind is within the Access template, any students who are shared across agencies, so more than one agency has entered them, end up being duplicated in these totals. So that enrolled number of 12,693 is high because there are students who were enrolled in more than one agency or under more than one grant, and they would be duplicated in this number. So these are not our official numbers, but it's a good set of numbers to look at to see how we're doing as a state overall. If we compare it to last month, there has been an increase in the number of adults who have a post-test, and not just the number, but kind of the percentage of the students, of our enrolled students who have a post-test. So now we're at approximately 43%. Our EFL gain percent has also increased a bit, up to approximately 5%, a little bit below, but approximately 25%. While our table 4B actually dropped a bit last month, it was at about 57.9%. Now we're down to 57.1, but we're still in that 57% that I've been kind of using as a guide. So as a state, we're making some progress towards the 57%, but we really still have a pretty good ways to go in making sure that our EFL gains based on post-testing are where they need to be in order for us to hit our 37% measurable skill gain. And just as a reminder, the calculations I did last month was if we stay at about the 57% table 4B, we really need to post-test no fewer than 65% of our students. Again, a reminder. Are there any questions so far? Nope. Okay. Okay, so the Access template has, I'm sure you know, a lot of reports and queries in it. And those a lot of the reports and queries are designed for local programs. Some of them are designed for state level use. Some of them that are designed for state level use may not be useful to you at all. So, they're different reports have different purposes. Right, there are several that I use as the state director to see overall state progress as well as kind of overall agency progress in key areas. If something stands out to me, I'll share it with the advisors. They'll look at those reports. They also use the performance reports to see more detail about the agencies and inform their conversations that they have with you in the monthly calls. One report that I look at regularly is the Adults Missing Post-Test and Eligible for Post-Testing report. And after I go through this slide, I'm going to show you the reports in the Access template itself and kind of what I look at. And in that one, for each agency, including subgrantees, the report shows the number of adults who have reached the test publisher's minimum number of hours for post-testing who do not have post-tests in eData. I also look at the data validation and NRS reports that kind of show how we're doing Table 4 and Table 4B. Okay, so I need to, let's see, I'm going to escape and minimize. Okay. Now, of course, I'm going to lose my notes. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? Am I showing the Access template? Okay, I've got some thumbs up. So, so I tried to bring everything up. So hopefully, because when we have all of the data from the whole state, the Access template can take a while to produce the query. So I think I've brought everything up to show you. So, this is the drop-down list of all the report pages that they have created. And within the assessment report, this is the one that I was mentioning, the adults missing post-test and eligible for post-testing. It's a count. And I think this is really nice. So Steve has kind of put a reminder of what those minimum number of hours for post-testing are on this page so that you can see them. So this is the report. And again, this isn't something that local programs necessarily are going to look at on a regular basis because it's a count, right? And so you would only see one line. Or if you have subgrantees, you might be able to see you and your subgrantees. We at the state level can see all of you. And I know this is probably pretty small. I believe if you go to maybe the bottom left-hand corner of the Teams meeting screen, you might be able to zoom in a little bit. I am not able to zoom in and make this any bigger within the Access template. Obviously the first column is the name of the agencies, and it does pull up, subgrantees who enter their data separately from the main grantee. So if they enter data under their own agency AUN, they're going to be in this column as well. So this column is the number of adults who are eligible for a post-test. They have reached that minimum number of hours to be the publisher's recommended minimum number of hours to post-test. That's just what that number is. Then this column, it would be the number of these individuals who do not have any post-tests in eData. Now, it could be as of the date on which I did the export from eData. So I did the export on Monday. Maybe you have some students that you entered post tests for after I did that, Tuesday, Wednesday this morning. So they would not be included in here. It, you know, Maybe you have post-tested people and you're not entering post-tests within the 14-day time frame. So you're out of compliance with your data entry, but you are in fact getting post-tests and you just haven't entered them. Some of these individuals could be people who are working towards passing the high school equivalency test, and they have taken a subtest and therefore shown an EFL gain by taking a subtest. That's not going to show up in here. And those individuals who showed measurable skill gain by passing the high school equivalency test are also not going to show up here. So I recognize that this column, adults missing any post-test, not everyone in that column is necessarily a problem, but it does give me a picture, right? I'm not at the local level, so I'm not the one who's trying to figure out which of these individuals is actually missing a post-test at the local level, but this is a picture for me, and it gives me an idea of where agencies are, what's happening. I share it with the advisors. The advisors might ask you questions about it to say, hey, can you explain what's going on with these people? These students, sorry. Do you have post tests for them? Is it a data entry issue? We also recognize that not all students are ready to be post tested when they hit those minimum hours. So you may have had conversations with your teachers and they said, hey, that student attended really regularly and then had to stop out for a period of time and they just returned. They've only been back 10 hours. They're not ready to be post-tested yet. Or, I think with just a little bit more time, that student might actually be able to show that educational functioning level gain. So I'd like them to be able to attend more classes. So, those are the conversations that you have locally, but we would like you to be able to understand why these numbers are what they are and be able to discuss that with your advisor and be aware of these numbers. So there are a number of reasons for these people to not have a post-test in eData, but it is something that I look at. I'm like, that's interesting, right? So this column is the percent of your students in your agency that are eligible for a post-test who do not have one in the system. Now, that percentage is probably useful for you. It's somewhat useful for me, but it's only your agency. And so if it's a very small agency, you might have 80% of your people not having a post-test, but within the state scheme of things, that might only be 8 people. And from my perspective, yes, as an agency, the advisors are going to have a conversation with you, but you're not an agency with only 8 people isn't impacting our performance as much as people with over 100, say. So this last column here, I is Steve is working on version 2.1, and he shared that with me ahead of time because I asked for this column. And what this column is showing me as the state director, so this is going to be meaningful to someone at a state level, not at the local level, I think. But I want you to see what I'm looking at is this is telling me of all of the people. So down here in this, you see that we have a total of about 2,300 people who do not have a post-test. This column here is of those people, what each agency, their percentage of the state total is. So of course, we've got several very large agencies. You know, you very large agencies actually carry a larger burden of our overall performance than the smaller agencies. And so I'm a little bit more concerned when you have a large, a large number of people who don't have post-tests in the system than I am if it's a very small agency. It's, we talk about the risk rubric when we monitor you, and being a large agency is a risk because you get more money and you have a greater impact on our performance, either positive or negative, as a large agency. So, I'm kind of looking at this, and we got several agencies where over 5% of the people who have enough hours do not have a post-test in eData. Again, there might be reasons for that. A couple of the agencies in here do IETs, and students who have IETs are allowed to show it's called measurable skill gain in ways other than an EFL gain, and that's not going to be reflected in this report. So, again, if those agencies can say to their advisors, hey, I know that we have these students, we didn't post-test them, but they did in fact show measurable skill gain in this other way, great, right? You know your data, but this is showing me something, and I'm going to say to the advisors, hey, can you find out what's going on here? Because, these agencies are the ones who are having a greatest impact on us, and we need them to get people post-tested or show measurable skill gain some other way so that we as a state can meet our outcomes. So that's one key report that I look at. The others are within
Amanda?
Yes.
Before you go on, we got a question in the chat from Cindy Line. She asks, does the adult missing post-test column populate when the minimum hours of attendance occur? If it's 40 hours, but we are following publisher recommendations to test at 70 hours, that's quite a difference.
Yes, it does. It does populate, and Steve can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is it populates when the individual hits those minimum hours. So again, I'm saying I'm seeing this. If you know that the reason people are in this is because you choose not to post-test at the minimum hours, but you choose to post-test after more than the minimum hours, that's fine, right? That's as you meet with your advisor, you can explain that to them. So again, I'm not saying we're not telling you have to post-test everybody when they hit those minimum hours. This is just giving me a picture, and I say to the advisors, hey, what's going on? And they can say to me, well, we've had the conversation with that agency, and we know that they tend to wait until the students have gotten closer to the upper end of the recommended time frame to post-test. We have an answer for it, I understand, right? So I hope that answers the question there. Is that okay? Did I address the question and kind of put context there?
She said thank you in the chat.
Okay. Thank you for that question. Let's see. So I went to that report. Another report, another set of reports that I look at is in the data validation tab, which gives overall Table 4 and Table 4B by contract. So this would be statewide 064. And again, just as examples, I brought up a couple, and I saved them as PDFs. Thank you, Steve, for that for that tip, because the system takes a really long time. So again, as of March 17th, this was our table for, let's see, in this I can actually zoom in a little bit. So our table 4 for the 064 grants. Again, there's some duplication in this number, but you can see we're somewhere at about 24% of EFL gains. Our MSG is 37%. And then this shows kind of how we as a state are doing. This is the table 4B, so the individuals who were pre and post tested in 064 grants, and how we're doing as a state around the 57%. So those are just some examples of how I, as the division chief, use the Access template. I am now going to stop sharing and allow Allison to take over and demonstrate for you how she uses some things. Hopefully she's set up so she can share. Didn't think to test that, I'm sorry.
Let's see.
Let's see. Do you have the share tab?
Do you have the share tab? I'm looking through it.
It would be next to the leave button in the upper right-hand corner.
Yeah.
Let's see.
But it's not sharing. Here we go. How about now?
Yay, yes.
I
can see it. Can everyone else see it? Okay, lots of thumbs up. You're good to go.
Okay,
Thank you,
perfect.
Allison.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Allison. I'm with Lehigh Carbon Community College. And just for understanding the context of our agency, we are the main agency, but we also have 2 sub-grantees. So some of the information I'm showing you is like very L-Tri-C specific, and some of it is with our 2 agencies, because a lot of times when I'm looking at information, I'm looking at both. So I'm looking at us performing as individuals, our standalone agencies performing, and then I am looking at us, our performance as like a coalition as well. So first thing I do whenever I am looking to find some information through the get some data from our eData Access template, the first thing I do is go to our data checking, because it doesn't matter what kind of information you want the most up-to-date and accurate information you can possibly have. So here's our data check from Monday. This is when I scrubbed our information. So by the way, all of the student names that you'll see have been scrubbed, so they're fake names. They're not our students, just so you know, putting that on there. But you'll see that we have some things that we need to fix in our data check. And so the first thing I always do before I kind of go into asking myself a question or building a query or filtering information is go ahead and clean up as much of our data checks as we possibly can, so that we have the most accurate information ready to go. So when I'm looking to do that, looking to find certain information, it's up to the minute. So in this situation, a big thing that I'm asking myself is, who is, I'm looking at this 18 over here, and I'm like, okay, who do I have for the adults missing post-test with 40 plus hours? So I'm going over to the data checking screen, and I'm going to this adults missing post-test with 40 hours. The really wonderful thing about the data checks is that the red flag that they give you, the code that they give you, is very easily found in the data checking section of the switchboard. So you'll be able to find all the information of every red flag that it gives you in the data checking column. As a reminder to everyone, we do receive from Steve an email the first Monday of the month with our data checks. However, you can literally get them at any point in time by going to your eData template, going into the switchboard and going into the data checking. It's this first button right here, this data checking summary report. And for those of you who have subgrantees, you will see all the subgrantee data checks as standalone agencies, which is really nice. So I'm interested in the adults missing post-test with 40 hours. So I'm going to click on that, and I can see all 3 of our agencies and the number of people that we have. And if I go to this little box at the bottom, it'll show that between my L-Tri-C and our 2 subgrantees, we have 36 people that are currently in that plus 40 category. So then I look at it and I go, okay, I know that these are plus 40. However, several of these people that I know, several of these students, we are not testing at 40 hours. So just as Amanda said earlier, we are not testing people exactly when they get to 40 hours. Some students need more than 40 hours in order to do the post-test and have the potential of making a gain. So I'm going to look at only the students that have 60 plus hours. Very easy way of finding that. All I do is I go to the hours column where I see the hours that each student has. And now it's not going to do it. Yep, there we go. I check off the select. I go down at the bottom and I just click all the hours that I want very easily. And then it automatically filters to the information that I'm now interested in. So I went from a record that was 36. Now I have 10. So now I'm looking at this 10 and I go, okay, these are people that have 60 plus. Now I need to start having conversations with ourselves internally and with our subgrantees as to why certain students haven't been tested yet. So it's a great way of going through, filtering your data, really kind of, to Cindy's question earlier, taking away pockets of hours that you know that you're going to post-test, but they're not quite ready yet, and really focusing on the students that you need to get in as soon as possible for post-testing. So now I know, okay, now I have a focus of 10 students, and now I know that I need to speak to our subgrantees about the following students. And then that's a lot of the conversations that we have that inform like our PIT meetings and things like that, of like, what are you doing to check your hours? How do you know, so we've had a ton of these conversations previously. And I know that one of our subgrantees were post-testing the last couple of days. So some of these are now have ended. So I'm very excited about that. Another thing that you can do through this is you can go into your adults page, click on adults, and you can see all of the students that you have had in your program over the course of the year. And the question I want to know is, how many ESL students have we tested this year so far, just Lehigh Carbon Community College? So again, we have institution name. I can see that I have here. You click this, and I just click my college. Boom. So it shows how many students we have at L-Tri-C currently, or not currently, but throughout the course of the year. And then if I go to entry EFL, and I focus solely on the ESL NRS levels, and I click on that, now I see that I have 251 names. Now I can get way more specific because we have an 064 and an 061 program, and I can go ahead and take those hours and I can filter them between 064 and 061. I'm not going to do that, but I know that I have 251 people that have been entered in the program and have an ESL assessment. In this case, it's CASAS. Next thing I want to do is I want to go to the assessment page. So if you go on assessments, this is the group of people, what assessments they've taken over the course of the year, what type of assessment they have taken. So again, I am looking at specifically L-Tri-C ESL. So I'm going to filter out this group. I am going to filter out, here's the version of the test. And when I click on it too fast, it leaves me. And I'm looking at steps. And I'm looking at, oh, I clicked one too many. I'm sorry. But, oh, because this is administration one. Okay, let's see what's happening. See, this is why doing this live is wild. But I can go on here and I can determine who tested, what did they test in, and then I can go in. A big thing that I always do is go to the number of administrations that someone tested in, and I can determine, okay, so if I want to see how many people took the CASAS STEPS listening test, and then how many people did the CASAS the post test, at least one administration of it, I can figure that out. And then I can kind of put side by side who we're missing listening tests from, and at what point did they leave the program? Or if they're still in the program, can we still get a test from them? So this is all just like very simple information that I pull constantly. So I know what kind of tests we're giving, what level of tests we're giving, who we're testing, all of that kind of good stuff. I go into even more details with form codes because form codes help me figure out competencies. And then when we're developing unit plans and curriculum, we can figure out what sort of competencies we need to focus on in order to for unit planning right before we do a bunch of post testing. So I don't know if anybody has any questions for that.
Hey, Allison, I'm just going to jump in and let everybody else know. For some reason, when you were clicking on the little arrows, we couldn't see the drop down where you were going and selecting Lehigh Carbon or something. So I just wanted to point out to everyone what she was doing was, I'm going to talk about you in the third person. What Allison was doing was clicking on kind of those little arrows next to the name of the column, and it brings up a drop down box and it gives you the option to select certain topics or sort or filter. And it just, for some reason, Teams wasn't displaying that. So sorry about that. Okay, so the next, I'm not going to share my screen again. Next up is Michael and Steve, who are going to give a demonstration of the Access template.
Indeed. So let me pick my screen. I think I know what's happening with that sharing content component. So let me see if I can configure something a little differently so I can fill in the gap for what you were just describing, Amanda. Let me share my monitor, which is kind of a big monitor. So is that showing up reasonably for everybody? Can you see not only what I'm sharing, but can you make any heads or tails of it, or is it too small?
It's pretty tiny.
Do you want to maybe share your screen, Steve? Because I have that massive screen. So with a problem with the screen share in Teams, a limitation I should say, is if you share an application, you don't see anything that layers on top of that application. You have to share your full desktop. So Steve, if you don't mind, could you share your screen
Sure.
with your,
Yeah,
and I think
yeah.
then we can both together walk through the items that have, and while we're doing that, I see in the chat here, yes, I completely agree, Cheryl. Thank you so much, Allison, for sharing all of that information from the agency perspective. That's a huge component of using the template, is having the context and working with questions that are really relevant at the agency level. So that was a fantastic overview, Allison. Thank you. So while Steve's getting this queued up, really, Amanda, you and Allison, you both covered quite a bit of content. There's not too much that we would add. I just have a couple thoughts really that I would share. Let's go ahead and start with the let's go ahead and start with just talking over the filtering. Do you have a scrub template ready, Steve?
I do now.
Okay. So then if we go to the, let's see, we want to go to the assessments page. And we can go ahead and let's just stay with the relevant query that we were talking about. Let's go adults missing post-test and eligible post-testing. That's the count, so we can show that. And so this will be a repeat of what you showed, Amanda, just to see. And we'll start here because this is really that 10,000 foot view that as administrators you all have with the data at your agency. And this is just the starting point. This can tell you a little bit about what is going on, what the trends are, and then there's ways to drill down to find who is really involved. Allison, you showed us one of those methods where you ran the data check, and then once you see the data check report, you have some things that are called to your attention. They may be mistakes, they may be errors, they could be just missing data. A great point that you made about going there and cleaning things up first and having that data as complete and accurate as possible before doing any kind of data analysis. So then you can go to some the bigger picture queries like Amanda you were sharing, where you can view here what's going on. And at the agency level, I wanted to make sure we pointed out that when you see this, you won't of course see the full breakdown of everyone across the state. You will instead see just your agency. So the adults missing any post-test, all adults count for everybody's going to be 100%, because you're going to see that. If you have a consortium like Allison you do, then you'll see the percentage across the consortium of your post-testing in that rightmost column. So this could be a great place to start thinking big picture. Where should we focus our attention? Where should we focus our efforts to maybe fill in some gaps? But this only tells you the big picture part of the story. So then, depending on your familiarity with the template and maybe who is on your data team at your agency, the next step would be to go back to that assessments tab that's open on the screen, and then possibly running one of the queries down below. So maybe you could run the adults without a post-test and hours query, for example, the one that has the option of changing the hours. So you know that if we look and string these two items together, the adults missing the post-test were derived from the table at the bottom of the screen that Steve is sharing. So we can see that if you primarily administer TABE, it's 40 hours. 30 for your adult secondary ed folks. Best is 60, and the CASAS is also 40. So maybe you say, okay, I've got some folks missing a post-test. But Cindy, you had pointed out maybe your cutoff is 60, maybe 70 hours. So we could start a drill down. And we could then pull up 60 hours here and then check the button. And then what we're going to see is we're going to start seeing those details. And the counts that you see here may very well match the numbers that you saw on that adults eligible for post-test, knowing that there might be some duplication if you have subcontractors and shared adults like you mentioned, Amanda. But then here you could start drilling down even further. And we've mentioned in the past the use of the keyword field. You see that that's been added to the right. So if you have, for example, here, this is statewide, but it's 1,876. It's hard to take any kind of action on a data set this big. What do you do with 1,800 people? It's too much. It's almost overwhelming. So that's where, when you were sharing those filters, Allison, that's where you can narrow down the data. So Steve, if you could click on that filter, drop the little triangle next to, so we could do a filter on the keyword field, and just let those hover there for a second. It may take a second for that to run, but this is what you were talking about, Allison, where you were selecting either the agency or the EFL in some of those filters. So depending on the type of the field, in this case, the type of the field is a text field, you'll have access provide to you a certain number of filters you can use. Text fields give you A to Z filter, Z to A, that's your sorting. If you have a date field, you can sort oldest to newest, newest to oldest. If you have a number field, smallest to greatest, and so on. And then also building on that idea of the data type, you have things like the text field. So Steve's hovering over the text filters, and you could see we could do an equals, does not equal. So if you have been thoughtful and intentional in advance about the keywords that your agency uses, let's say you just want to see the students with JACC. I see that keyword down below. So we can either use the checkboxes, or since there's a lot to pick from, we can do the equals function. So Steve will click on equals. We'll type in JACC. I don't think capitalization matters here, does it, Steve?
Does not.
Okay. So now we've gone from thousands of records to 6. And that's what you had shared also, Allison, is you could take this down to an actionable list, and you can say, okay, this is of students that we might need to take a closer look at. This only tells us what and who. What is how many hours of assessment, who is the people. Now the why and how we take care of it is up to you, whether that's disseminating this down to a site supervisor. And that's where the keyword comes into play and helps you with that sort of task of taking action on your data. Is the keyword can say, okay, if I do site keywords, I can then filter by the site itself, just as Steve has done, and then send out this information as a little bit of a report or a check-in for that site supervisor for JACC, and say, okay, let's take a look at these folks and see what's going on here. Because then those folks, the closer you get to the source and the more you drill down, the more you can fill in the whys and the hows, and that's how you can take action. And I think those are just a few comments that we wanted to add, just in terms of the sort of technical, mechanical aspects of all of it, just to build on both what you had presented, Amanda, and then what you presented as well, Allison. And then I think one more thing, Steve, just to kind of show off a new function that you provided. If you go to the main page and click on the switchboard and just leave it open for a moment, just so folks can see, you've already seen folks work through all of these pages. And there is, I'll mention some resources towards the end when we get back to the PowerPoint, but I'll just take a note now to say that there is a template guide that has a description of each of the pages you see listed that Steve has open in the switchboard. Most of them hopefully are kind of intuitive, hours be on the hours page, assessments on the assessments page, and so on. But it's sometimes pretty tough to find an answer to a specific question, even for us, with all these queries. So if you go to the template guide and you do the classic Control F, maybe enter a phrase, there's descriptions of all the queries are embedded in that guide, and that may help you out too. But just one quick thing to do that show off before we get back to the PowerPoint. Steve, if you could go down to the class group reports page. And the query that we just showed a moment ago that Steve was demonstrating is marked as new on the bottom, because as of version 2 of the template, you can now run that same query by class or class keywords. So perhaps if you looked at the previous query and you didn't have keywords, now you have available to you the opportunity to run a query here by either the class's name and selecting it from this list, or using the filter function that Steve has built in, where you could sort and organize. Let's say you put in your class keywords the instructor's initials. You could search by just that instructor's initials in that class group keyword field. And I don't know if we have a demonstration set up, so I'll just kind of describe it. But let's say you had my initials, MDM, and I taught a class, and I wanted to see just the students that I have that have maybe more than 60 hours. So I could clear that class group key, put a star into the class name to be a wildcard. And then I could do star MDM star for the keyword, knowing that my initials will show up. Now we don't have this set up, so it probably won't work, but let's say I wanted to do 60 hours. Perfect. So Steve now configured it where when we click that button, we might get nothing because oh, look at that. That worked. Wow. So let's say that was my initials are in there. And so there we have a list of the individuals that I might need to take a closer look at for assessments. And that's that actionable part where you start with that big list of students, but we wanted to show you this function on the class group reports page because there's an additional layer or way that you can further filter things down into data that you can then follow up and take action on. So Steve, was there anything that you'd like to add?
Yes, just follow up on what was said earlier. This is maybe very obvious, but when you go to, Allison was talking about the data check summary report. These there's no requirement to run the data check summary report in its full. You can go straight to these. If you just want to run it knowing that there's going to be students in this adults missing post test, you don't need to get the count in order to make this work. These all work independently, in other words. So you can just go right to them and they'll give you the information that it says.
Hi, there is a question. When a student is pre-tested in more than one test, but is post-tested in only one test because of their area of study, will they continue to show up on the eligible for post-test list because of not being tested in both assessments? I think the answer is no, right? At least the one that I was demonstrating, as long as they have a post-test, they do not show up in the not post-tested column. Is that correct, Steve?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
And that is a very good question, though, because there are some assessments, Jenny, that will show folks that are missing a post-test who already have one in another subject area. It just depends on how the query is designed and what question it was designed to respond to. So just as many questions or queries as there are in here, those all came from a question at one point in time or another. And that's just one sort of final point I'll add, is that if you are trying to find things in the template, one thing that helps us, and certainly I think will help everybody, is to try to refine your question as much as possible. So if there's a layer, like you just pointed out, the queries, sometimes it's not immediately obvious the criteria that's used. And what I would say is if it's at all ever confusing to you and you're trying to make decisions based on data you're seeing in the template, please feel free to follow up with us and verify and say, I want to make sure I know what I'm looking at. I'm running this query and I'm getting these 6 adults, and I want to make sure that I'm understanding what this is. Please feel free. I mean, you could consult, of course, the template guide, but certainly reach out to us directly and we can confirm that, because that is an important component of making sure that the data questions that you're asking are getting answered in a way that makes sense and is relevant to the problem you're trying to solve.
Family Lit probably knows this, but Family Lit has their own data checking page, which are also on the data check summary report. There just was so many of them that we put them on a separate page. They are in the same family as the data check page. They're just specific to Family Lit.
Okay, thank you very much. I know we could probably do a 24-hour webinar on the Access template alone.
Yes.
I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. So thank you, Allison. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Steve, for those demonstrations. Just some recommended next steps for you as program administrators, coordinators, is maybe to sit down and look at review your processes. How does program leadership get and use your data? Are you as a program administrator actively using the access template, or are you kind of depending on your data quality specialist? And maybe you need to have a conversation with, as a team to say, are we getting the information that we need? If not, what can you ask for? Do you want to set up regular timeframes to get reports? How are you going to involve your data quality specialist and your data entry staff in getting and using the data? And also, how are you going to make sure your direct service staff have access to it? Some of you may have your staff actively using the access template, others may not. I know that there are challenges with actually having access on computers, so maybe you have to think about how you're going to make sure direct service staff can get the data that they need so that you can get post-testing done. So I'd recommend sitting down, kind of thinking about the processes and what can you do to improve access to data for decision making. And now for the second bullet, I'm going to turn it over to Marcella Movid, who is the new director of ISIL at Penn State. And we are very lucky because Marcella started at Penn State many years ago with data for Pennsylvania. And then she actually worked for many years at the National Reporting System Support Project nationally and has helped people across the country, states, with their data. So she has some great comments around actually using the data.
Oh, Amanda, you are too kind. So I think the thing I really wanted to highlight for us before we wrap up is that when we're thinking about data, it's really easy to, on your screen, you see lots of numbers, and you see the numbers go up, go down, etc. But really what's behind the numbers are the people, right? So each number represents a person who has specific needs, who has their own life, that has their own responsibilities, lots of things going on. So beyond just looking at the numbers that you see on the screen, it's important to look at what is causing you to see those numbers, right? So it's always helpful to look at your services and how those are helping the individual people who are behind those numbers. If you see that, for example, if you drill down in your data and you see that one class is doing really well, it can be really helpful to talk to the teacher and the students in that class to find out what has made them successful. Perhaps that's something that you can replicate. Similarly, if you see that there are perhaps classes or maybe like a certain group of students that are not progressing as you would like or not making the gains that you would expect, it can be helpful to talk to those students and really ask, what's going on? How can we help you? Maybe is a common need, perhaps transportation is a common issue that they're having, and you can sort of try to see how can we help the people that are behind the numbers, and then last, evaluate the impact of the change. So you made a change and your numbers go up, which is great. But it's important to see, is it because, it's just a coincidence, or is it really that we did the X and it led to Y? Or is it also, is the change that we're doing enough? Are there more things that we could do? If we made this small tweak, we could get even better numbers. So just some things to look at. And again, I know I'm repeating myself at this point, but it's important to remember that it's not just numbers on a page or a screen. There really are people, and we are always thinking about how we can better serve them through the services that we're providing. And I'll hand it back to you, Amanda.
Thank you, Marcella. It's always important to, as a reminder, I can sometimes really focus on the data and then the reminder that those are people with lives. Lastly, there are resources around the access template. There's the Pennsylvania are the resources, the access template page, which, oops, it's not opening up on the right screen. Here we go. The PAIR website, the Pennsylvania Adult Education Resources web site, has lots of information on it. And then there's also the NRS data use on demand module that the professional development system has. And Michael, I'll let you talk about the eData tech support.
Thanks, Amanda. So just to wrap up real quick here, we have a couple things. I mean, many of you we've talked to directly. Most of you know our services. We do run webinars monthly on Fridays that we see many of your data quality specialists attend. There are also I would say almost quarterly webinars, beginning of the program year, end of the program year, where we announce things to work on. But specifically to the topic of the day with assessments, the assessments can be one of the more complicated topics when we're doing data analysis, because unlike hours where we might say one adult has this many hours and they have this many hours in a specific contract, we have one adult with several assessments, and then we have post-test assessments, and then we have timing on the assessments, and it gets complicated very fast. So if it's frustrating for you or your team to go through the assessments, if you're feeling like it's a hard thing to analyze, that is perfectly normal. I mean, it's something that makes our head spin once in a while because it can get complicated very quickly. So that comment leads right into the final comment here, which is targeted TA, which is feel free to reach out to us at eData Tech Support. We can do quick Zoom calls, phone calls, whatever it is. We've met with agencies for as short as 20 minutes to just answer a couple of questions with their data team to help provide a little guidance if they're stuck, or to get them started, to help you down that data analysis journey to find, to Marcella's point, the people that you're trying to support and really identify what it is that they might need and how you can help serve them. So we'll leave with that comment, Amanda. That's all I have.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Marcella. Appreciate everyone's participation in this webinar. Thank you all for joining us, and happy first day of spring. Have a good weekend. I will stay on for a couple more minutes if there are a few questions, but
Yeah, I can do that too.